this is how Elle survived in the Stranger Things finale. But first, disclaimer. The Duffers wrote the Stranger Things finale intentionally to be ambiguous, so that you can interpret Eleven being dead or alive. And there is a great case to suggest that she's dead. However, there's also many facts that can point to her being alive. However, I'm seeing a lot of people kind of dismiss these facts and just being like, nah, she's 100% dead, and I'm just here to disprove that. I'm just here to say that there are many facts that that if you want to believe, she can be alive. Okay, and also, will these theories have some flaws, maybe some holes? Perhaps, but guess what? The show is full of them, so let's go. Callie. A lot of people have dismissed the idea of Elle faking her death because they think that Callie died straight away. But I remember watching the finale for the first time with my friend, seeing the scene where Callie is shot, and finding it odd that they almost cut her line in half. Like, it was almost like she began to say a line, but then she was interrupted halfway with the next take, with Hopper coming in and Callie already being dead. And I had a feeling that they would return to this scene and we would see the rest of what she said. And what happened in the show? We saw the rest of what she said. I fully believe that from the second that Hopper walks back in to see Callie dead, I believe that we are seeing an illusion of Callie having died. Believe me, Callie still dies. However, I feel like she doesn't die until the explosion happens, because guess what? Being shot in the stomach is A, one of the worst places to be shot, but B, you do not die that quickly. Who's seen Reservoir Dogs? Huh? That Mr. Pink, I think it was Mr. Pink? No, Mr. Orange was shot in the stomach. He lost so much blood and it took him a whole film to die. That girl ain't dead. At least not until the explosion happens. Also like to add the point that people said that there's no way that Callie could have done that illusion because once the bomb hit, then she would have been sucked in straight away, she would have died, and then that illusion should have ended as soon as she had died. But what are we forgetting? The majority of that illusion is before the bomb goes off, because we see when they're playing Purple Rain, and we see when the Mike the Brave figure hits the antenna and it blows up. Most of the illusion has been done by then. And secondly, when Hopper pulls Elle out of the bath after he thinks he shot her, it takes a while for Elle to actually disappear from Henry's mind. There's a bit of a delay, so I fully believe that there was a bit of a delay, which could also line up with Mike's theory about the vision of Eleven kind of flickering a little bit as she disappeared, because that's the vision of essentially beginning to fail. Point 3. Distance to the gate. We know that the truck that everyone was in was right next to the Radio Shack, and the Radio Shack is an entrance to the tunnels. The gate, which is where the library used to be, is all the way across the Maxi. And we also know that the kryptonite was turned on, and we have seen 3 times how the kryptonite affects Elle. She can barely move, she's pretty much subdued straight away, and at her strongest she can stagger across a room. So you mean to tell me that with the kryptonite blaring at her, she was able to make it from the truck to the gate that quickly without being noticed at all by no guards or no people at all? Let's be serious. Earlier on in the episode, she had kryptonite affecting her and Carly and she could barely move, and you want me to believe she made it all the way to the gate of the Upside Down? Let's be real here. Speaking of kryptonite, point 4, pulling Mike to the void. Had Eleven actually made it to the gate, to the Upside Down, there is no way she would have been able to have used her powers to pull Mike into the void, right? Now, before you suggest, oh, Mike was hallucinating this scenario, or Callie had done an illusion to trick Mike into thinking he was speaking with Elle into the void, no. Because if Mike's theory is correct, and if Elle really did escape into the tunnels, then by the time she was down in the tunnels, she wouldn't be in range for the kryptonite to affect her, which means she would have then been able to pull Mike into the void and have a conversation. Now, we know that when Elle pulls people into the void or she travels into people's minds, she usually has a blindfold. So did Elle maybe stop in the tunnels, like use a blindfold to cover her eyes and then communicate with Mike? I don't know. Or did she just simply close her eyes and try and do it whilst running? I don't know. This is where the hole in my theory kind of forms. But her being able to communicate with Mike and pull him into the void whilst being in the tunnels is way more likely than her being able to communicate with Mike by the gate of the Upside Down with the suppression beams being right there. Number 5. Previous examples of character deaths. In Stranger Things, there have been 2 times where characters have died, where we've not seen their body, and they come back. First one, Papa himself, season 1. We all assume he's been killed by a Demogorgon, as we see him get attacked by a Demogorgon. But guess what? The bitch comes back 3 seasons later, fully alive. Season 3, Hopper. We see Hopper and we think he's been fully disintegrated by, I don't even know what that was, a machine, that collider, the thing that the Russians were inventing. That thing exploded, it closed the gate. We thought Hopper died. Everyone mourned him. I mourned him. But guess what? They brought him back for season 4. And with 11, we see her being whisked away when the Upside Down is blown up. But do we see a body? No, we don't. Now, obviously, you could argue, well, yeah, her body was sucked out of a wormhole into space. But again, no dead body, no proof. Literally, just look at Hopper, just look at Papa, look at when they tried to kill Will, yeah, and what did they give us? They gave us a fake body. Hell, they killed Max, showed us the dead body, and then they brought her back, like 10 minutes later, yeah? Also, someone brought up a very good point that whenever they use heroes is always used when we're mourning a character who we think has died but actually hasn't. Example 1, Will. Example 2, Hopper. And now we have Heroes by David Bowie playing in the credits, seemingly in the episode when Elle's died, and the last proper conversation we have in that episode is them believing that Elle is alive, yeah? And also, I just want to say that the rest of Mike's theory makes sense, with him finally connecting the dots at graduation about the speakers and remembering that the kryptonite beams were there, so there's no way that Elle would have been able to have used any of her powers with those beams on, which means she must have snuck out. Point 6. Again, like I said up here with the disclaimer, the show has an ambiguous ending, and now that the show is over, the Duffers can say whatever they like. But if the Duffers haven't written how they interpret their ending as part of a script or as part of a show or any canon material, aka comics, novels, canon video games, or like future episodes, spin-offs, whatever, then it's not canon. Now, the Duffers, in their recent interviews, have supported the theories that there's no way that Elle would have been able to have gotten across the gate or been able to pull Mike into the void had the kryptonite been affecting her. That's what helped me solidify these theories. However, they then said they don't see 11 communicating with the others ever again. But there's a difference between what they said about her powers and what they said about her communicating with the others. And the Duffers said, oh yeah, it brings the questions, how was she able to get across to the gate? How was she able to pull Mike into the void? They are not saying anything about this is how they see it, this is how they view it as. However, when they're asked about do they think 11 would communicate with Mike or anybody else if she did survive, they frame their language by saying, I don't see it as this, I don't think. That's their personal opinion, aka their personal interpretation. So, again, the show is over. The Duffers have no control over their characters or the show anymore as long as they don't make any more canon material, which means you can interpret it any way you like. If you think 11 really died and everyone just has to move on with their lives, then that is absolutely your prerogative. if you think Elle survived but never contacted anyone ever again, you have the right to do that. But if you think Elle survived and would one day contact Mike or someone again in the future, no one can tell you you're wrong, because the Duffers have not said in any canon material that that doesn't happen. All they have said is that they believe in their interpretation, or in their opinion, they don't think that would happen. But if they've not written it in any form of canon material, then it's not true. And now that the show is over, they don't get a say anymore. It's called Death of the Author. That is when a project or a story has grown larger than its creator. Look at Star Wars. George Lucas doesn't get a say on what happens with his characters anymore. Hell, years ago, like 30 years ago, we were getting Legends novels, and even then George Lucas didn't get a say on what happened with his characters anymore. And since Legends, we've now got Disney, who have taken their own interpretations of what happens with the characters. And a more recent example, the Marauders fandom. Does J.K. Rowling get a say on what happens with Remus Lupin, or Wolfstar, or Sirius Black, or any of that? No, because the story has grown larger than Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling. The Marauders has become its own thing. And that can happen with Stranger Things, and it can happen with any project ever. Eventually, the story grows larger than its creator, and you, the viewer, or the reader, or the fan, can do whatever you want with these characters. That's why fan fiction is so great. So please don't let what the Duffers have said in some interviews about their own personal interpretations cause you to get depressed because you viewed it in a different way. You're a fan. You're allowed to interpret it any way you want, especially now that the show is over. Don't worry what they're saying in interviews. If you agree with what they're saying in interviews and it helps you with some theories, brilliant. But when it comes to what happens to the characters years and years and years into the future, who gives a shit? If you want Elle to reunite with characters, you can. It doesn't matter. So in conclusion, number 1, the disclaimer. This show is supposed to have an open ending and is supposed to be open to interpretation. Through editing, we can see that Callie's death seemed to have been interrupted or cut short, like her lines weren't fully said before we saw her dead, which suggests that the death we see on screen was in fact the beginning of Callie's illusion. Number 3, with the kryptonite, there's no way 11 would have been able to have gotten from the truck all the way to the gate undetected in that short amount of time, as we have seen how heavily the kryptonite affects her. Number 4, again, with the kryptonite, there's no way that 11 would have been able to have pulled Mike into the void, and could have only done that if she was out of range of the kryptonite, which means she must have been in the tunnels or in a different location by that point. Number 5, we have seen many times in Stranger Things that they're really bad at killing off their characters and having them stay dead. So if you don't see a body, it's likely that they didn't die. And in the one rare case with Max, even then they can be brought back. And also, with every time they use heroes, it's always about a character death that's never stayed permanent. And number 6, now that the show is over, you can interpret it any way you like. It doesn't matter anymore. And just one more thing. It's Netflix, and based on the finale, I think every Netflix promo has decided to go with the I believe theory rather than the rest in peace Elle theory, because you know for sure that there's no way that there's not going to be some spin-off that they want to do with 11 in like 15 years. So there you go.